Adapting a beloved comic book character onto the big screen isn't easy. You need to juggle many different elements from decades worth of comics into just 90 or 120 minutes. Even the characters that seem like they're one-note caricatures are surprisingly complex. To anyone who only knows about the Hulk through the MCU, there are many stark differences and subtle details that just weren't brought over. The most important thing that I don't think the MCU truly ever portrayed correctly is who exactly Bruce Banner is and who the Hulk is, because they are in fact two distinct people fighting for control.
No Banner, only Hulk!
In the comics, Bruce comes from an abusive home. His father ends his mother's life in a fit of blind fury. This is actually a key moment that defines Bruce's resentment towards getting angry. He has seen what anger can do to a person and the people around him, and now it's the source of his superpower, and he doesn't see it that way, because the Hulk is essentially a curse. And the Hulk is destructive. He can destroy anything in his path. Even the slightest loss of control could mean people he loves and care about will get hurt. Over the years, though, the thing that binds Bruce and the Hulk are their willingness to save others. Bruce has always been a hero, and the reason that he got caught in the gamma bomb in the comics was because he was trying to save some kid who wandered onto a top-secret weapons test site. Don't think about the logistics of how it was written in the 60s. And the Hulk, despite being far more savage, still sees the destruction that he causes and wants to make things better the only way he knows how: by smashing. Oh, and the Hulk is strong. Immeasurably strong. There are only a few characters in all of Marvel who are infinitely strong, and one of them is the Hulk. He's not just able to lift plains or mountains, but entire planets. He also has super speed because, his legs are just as strong as his arms. He's indestructible, yet he can still heal from anything that can manage to hurt him. He can't even be stopped by Professor X or any kind of mind control, and if he even runs into the slightest amount of difficulty, well, he can always get more angry. It's because of this uncontrollable raw power that calling on Bruce has always been a last resort. Hulk really is seen as more of a liability than an asset. The heroes have no problem keeping Bruce at arm's distance because he could turn into the Hulk at any moment. They may see that Bruce is altruistic, and even as the Hulk, he can defeat any foe they may come across. But no, it really wasn't a difficult decision for the quote-unquote good guys to throw him into outer space just to get rid of him. So how have most attempts gone to adapt the superhero equivalent of Dr. Jeckel and Mr. Hyde? Mostly misses. The 1978 Incredible Hulk television series starring Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno understood the assignment. Well, kind of. The show was very far removed from the comic book source material, even going so far as to rename Bruce Banner to David Banner. The series creator Kenneth Johnson disliked comic books and refocused the show into being a more fantastic retelling of Les Mis, with Jean Valjean now being David Banner, a scientist who was hunted for committing no real crime, and Javert is now Jack McGee, an obsessive reporter who is dead set on getting Banner arrested, but is always conflicted in why he's after the Hulk to begin with. The pilot drastically changed how Banner became the Hulk by having the science experiment in the spinny chair go wrong instead of pushing a kid away from the gamma bomb. And it is kind of nice seeing how later iterations reference the show's change, but I will get into those in a sec, don't worry. Over the next 5 seasons and 3 made-for-television movies, each episode essentially follows the same plot. David takes on a new name and wanders into town. He takes some small job to get by that's far below his doctorate degree from Oxford. He then stumbles into trouble and reluctantly decides to save the guest star of the week. The plot can sometimes be silly, and the body paint and styrofoam sets are even more ridiculous. What elevates the series in many people's eyes is the ending to every episode. I'm sure everyone knows the iconic piano score as Banner slowly walks away during the credits, but it's about how every episode is just him trying to find somewhere to just exist, but coming to terms with that he can't stay there either, and it gets more and more depressing as the series goes on. He's a hero, and yet no one will ever see him as anything else other than a monster. So that's why he has to just walk away. The next time we saw the Hulk in live action was with Ang Lee's 2003 Hulk film. The origin story this time around brought back all of Bruce Banner's supporting characters, and they even brought in Bruce's dad, played by Nick Nolte, as the villain. Although they did make him into Absorbing Man, but hey, I can let that slide because Sam Elliott is still the perfect General Thunderbolt Ross. He's perfect as any military man, actually.
Good morning, Sergeant Major.
How do you know what kind of goddamn day it is?
And the aesthetics of the film really latched onto the comic book source material with its transition effects. But if I'm being honest, the film is what it is. The plot was kind of also all over the place, mixing the loner trying to fit in story with the government wants him as a weapon story and the evil dad wants to be evil story, and it doesn't execute any of them. Banner and his dad fight, Ross drops a gamma bomb on both of them, and the fight just ends. Bruce goes off to the Amazon rainforest, and that's the last we saw of Eric Bana's Bruce Banner. It rode the wave of the early 2000s superhero craze, it made a bunch of money, and it just wasn't well received by any fans or critics. I remember seeing this in theaters and being very off-put by the CGI even back then, and they definitely don't hold up to what we'd eventually get a few years later. Which brings us into the MCU. It's a soft reboot and sort of sequel, with every role being recast, and Edward Norton now taking over as Banner. And Bruce reappears 5 years later in Rio de Janeiro, where the Bill Bixby Hulk show truly grasped what it was like to be Banner. The 2008 Incredible Hulk film truly understood the Hulk as a destructive monster and a curse that Bruce had to carry with him. Edward Norton's depiction leans more into the dramatic side of a fugitive on the run trying to find a cure. A lot of this came from Edward Norton's rewrites as he saw the film elevated from the standard superhero flick that Marvel was trying to make. It was a genuinely good film that just didn't make enough money in the box office and was controlled by Universal and not Disney. Norton and Marvel would go their separate ways after creative differences, although he was contractually allowed to make any and all rewrites, and healthy collaboration between talent is how art is made. Can we get a release of the Norton cut going? Apparently there's 70 minutes of lost footage. After this comes the era that most fans will associate the Hulk with the Mark Ruffalo depiction, because he appeared in some of the largest films Hollywood has ever seen, and well, Bruce became a side character for the rest of his appearances. Any character growth and huge moments in this iteration of Bruce always comes off screen, learning to control his anger, his lowest point where he wanted to end his life, his entire relationship with Black Widow, Banner being pushed to the side and Hulk is now fully taken over, Hulk thriving in an alien gladiatorial arena, his reconciliation with the Hulk to the point where kids want to take selfies with him, and him apparently also having a son, all off screen. He's also significantly less powerful. The Hulk is supposed to be the strongest there is. That's even one of his catchphrases. Yet his win-loss record against actually named characters is atrocious. Not the waves of minions, because that seems to be all the Hulk is actually good for, while, the real star of the show goes to handle the big bad. It's indecisive if Thor would have won on the helicarrier in the Avengers. He smashed Loki, who didn't really put up a fight, but it counts. He loses to Iron Man in a clean fight. He technically won the fight with Thor on Sakaar because of interference, but to us fans, it's still indecisive again. He threw the Wolf Fenris off the edge of Asgard, but that's not really a challenge. The fight is called off against Surtur, then he loses probably the most humiliating fight against Thanos, who's just toying with the strongest Avenger. Hulk gets outboxed so bad that he never actually appears in the MCU again. Remember how the most crucial part of Bruce and Hulk's story is that they're actually two separate beings? Yeah, from here on out, it's just Bruce. When they do finally emerge in Endgame, it's a huge disservice to the Hulk as a character. He's now just a vehicle for Bruce to pilot, which ultimately amounts to nothing of interest. Sure, everyone can point out that Professor Hulk is a thing in the comics, but it only really lasts from issue 377 to around issue 425. And the biggest moment for Bruce Banner in the MCU, when he finally undoes the snap and brings back the other half of the universe, well, that should have been a big deal, yet it wasn't. Tony is the real hero of the moment for destroying Thanos' army, and this robbed the Hulk of getting even with Thanos because Hulk didn't even fight in the 3-on-1, and after we see him charge into battle, nothing. We get a glory shot of literally every other character in the MCU during this fight, just never one of the Hulk. Then he just winds down into settling into a mentor role for his cousin Jen, the She-Hulk, which brings us to the ultimate question. What can the MCU really do with the Hulk anymore? Disney does have the rights back since the Edward Norton film came out 15 years ago now. However, there's not much really left to tell. We do know that we're getting more Thunderbolt Ross, who could eventually become the Red Hulk, and Tim Blake Nelson will be back to reprise his role to finally become the leader. Same with Liv Tyler's Betty Ross, and her best run came when she was the Red She-Hulk. So there's something to work with. And it definitely feel like a gigantic waste if Bruce Banner didn't show up in the film for a bit, but the film probably should focus more on being a Captain America movie since it's Anthony Mackie's first film with the mantle. As for untouched stories for Bruce and the Hulk, there is the storyline with Maestro, an alternate future version of the Hulk where the world is destroyed by nuclear war. This could be very interesting, but the only way to naturally fit him into this would be through the Secret Wars film, and that seems to already be stacked with wish fulfillment. There's a proper Planet Hulk film, yet, again, this was already done, and all of the moments of him rallying the gladiators to fight their oppressors was just given to Thor instead. There's also World War Hulk, But another problem with the MCU's depiction of the Hulk is that no one is really afraid of him. Crowds adored him after the Avengers, and any collateral damage he may have caused is always swept under the rug. He destroys maybe 2 abandoned buildings, one in New York and another in Johannesburg, so it's not really built up in the MCU to have any of that make sense. So, Bruce and the Hulk story is basically done, which is kind of a bummer, I know, but there just isn't any more room to grow that doesn't retcon major moments, even if they all happened off screen. Mark Ruffalo is one of the last remaining members of the original lineup to still be in the MCU, and the only one who hasn't been written off to have a proper farewell. He's passed the torch on to She-Hulk, but honestly, I think he'd probably be best as a mentor to the entire new Avengers lineup, and maybe sort of fill out the role that Nick Fury had. But what do you guys think? What would you like to see happen with the Hulk moving forward? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, if you enjoyed today's video, please hit that like button and subscribe for more weekly content on comic books and nerd stuff. I've been Eric, and you've been awesome.